Let's begin with our top story coming out of Afghanistan, where U.S. troops have begun leaving the country for the initial troop withdrawal mandated by the Doha Agreement. Under that deal, the U.S. will cut the number of forces in the country to 8,600 from the current 13,000. The U.S. Forces in Afghanistan spokesperson said Washington has begun its conditions-based reduction of forces to 8,600 over 135 days. Colonel Sonny Leggett said this step is being taken in accordance with the U.S.-Afghanistan Declaration and U.S.-Taliban Agreement. He said the U.S. forces maintain all military means and authority to accomplish its objectives, including anti-ISIS and al-Qaeda operations. Well, the U.S. has denounced the parallel governments in Afghanistan after former Chief Executive Abdullah swore himself in as president in opposition to Ashraf Ghani. Last month, the Election Commission declared Ghani the winner of the presidential election, but Abdullah rejected the results. In a tweet, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington strongly opposes any use of force to resolve political differences. Pompeo said all disagreements must be solved through amicable means. The Secretary of State said prioritizing an inclusive government is paramount for peace and the future of Afghanistan. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has said he will continue to talk to both leaders for an inclusive Afghan government. Khalilzad says both Ghani and Abdullah have said they are open to negotiations to end the political crisis and prioritize peace. In Kabul, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says a mechanism for the release of Taliban prisoners has been finalized. Speaking after taking his oath of office, Ghani said he would issue a presidential decree on the release of prisoners today. The president said today he will also finalize his negotiating team for peace talks with the Taliban. The release of up to 5,000 Taliban prisoners was part of the Doha Peace Accord. It is expected to open the way for intra-Afghan negotiations. On to news coming out of India now, where activists and civil rights bodies in Assam have held a massive rally against the controversial Citizenship Act on Holi. 83 people, mostly Muslims, have been killed in countrywide demonstrations against the law since December 11th. Thousands of civilians carried fire torches in a night rally and burnt a symbolic effigy of the new citizenship law. Women in Delhi also held a rally against the law, demanding its immediate withdrawal. The all-women sit-in at Shaheen Bagh and Mumbai Bagh continued despite pressure by police and the BJP government. The Indian government has faced strong opposition both at home and internationally over this new law. In a related development, despite the Indian High Court's orders, the Uttar Pradesh government has refused to remove name and shame posters, State police had put up those billboards with identification of Anti-Citizenship Act protesters in Lucknow and plans to do the same in Meerut. The UP government says it is examining the court's orders and evaluating the grounds on which they are being issued. Declaring the posters a violation of the right to privacy, the court has directed the BJP-ruled state to remove the banners immediately. Meanwhile, the family of a Kashmiri couple arrested by Indian police have said they've been arrested merely for being Muslims. The family said the couple has no link to the Citizenship Act demonstrations and protesters. The couple has been charged with sedition, allegedly for instigating demonstrators against the act. Well, the global death toll from the new coronavirus has now passed 4,000. The outbreak has spread to over 100 countries with more than 110,000 cases of infection. The Italian government has put the entire country under lockdown after the COVID-19 cases spiked in all 20 of its regions. This report has more.
Global hysteria is rising as the novel coronavirus continues to spread across the world. The whole of Italy, a country of some 60 million people, has been placed under quarantine. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has cancelled all public gatherings and asked people to stay at home.
That means that people shall avoid, on the whole territory, to move unless motivated by three specific circumstances: important work reasons, urgent necessary reasons, or health reasons.
La zona 2 della penisola.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. This is his first visit to the city since the epidemic began last year. The UN has warned that the outbreak is threatening to become a global pandemic and can cost the world economy up to $2 trillion.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled. The bottom line is, we're not at the mercy of the virus.
In the US, incoming White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has self-quarantined, saying he might have come into contact with an infected person. Elsewhere, Mongolia has barred anyone from entering or leaving its cities for 6 days after reporting its first case of coronavirus.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has called for stronger support from his NATO allies on crisis in Syria. In a joint press conference with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in Brussels, Erdogan said Ankara needs more assistance to defend its borders. This report has the details.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan flew to Brussels to ask for Europe's financial, political and military help in talks with the EU and NATO leaders. The European blocs have asked Ankara to stop pushing migrants to the Greek border and work in mutual agreement.
Today's discussion focused on mapping the areas on which we can work, both in the EU's interest and in Turkey's interest. And indeed, as you said, a lot goes back to the EU-Turkey statement of 2016, which remains valid, and we discussed today how to implement the missing pieces.
But the Turkish president accused Greece of misleading the European bloc to exploit the current situation.
It is beyond reason and understanding that an ally and a neighboring country points towards Turkey as the one responsible for the wave of irregular migration. And I have expressed to the distinguished Secretary General that we are not going to allow this country to use this current situation and use the European Union in order to obtain unjust gains for itself.
Erdogan says Turkey needs more support from NATO to safeguard its borders. He said the crisis in Syria threatens the region and all of Europe, adding that no European country has the luxury to remain indifferent.
Well, Turkey has also said it's killed 36 militants from the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria and Iraq. The Defense Ministry says the militants died in Operation Peace Spring and Euphrates Shield. The ministry said the army killed 18 PKK fighters attempting to infiltrate northern Syrian territories. It said 13 others were killed in an operation in Tel Rafat. The ministry said 5 militants were killed in military operations backed by air power in Iraq's Kandil region. Ankara identifies the PKK group as terrorists and holds them responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year-old conflict. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says the UAE, Jordan and Egypt supplied weapons to the Khalifa Haftar-led Libyan National Army. In a report, the institute said the states provided armored vehicles and military helicopters to Haftar's army over the last 5 years. The report said fighter jets and drones supplied by the UAE had been used in the Libyan civil war during 2019. The Research Institute said the UAE's involvement in Libya is part of its assertive foreign policy. In April last year, Haftar's military launched a campaign to capture Tripoli from the internationally recognized government of National Accord. Unidentified assailants have killed at least 43 people in raids on villages in northern Burkina Faso. In a statement, the government said the villages of Denguila and Barga in Yatenga province were targeted on Sunday. The statement said 6 other people were hospitalized with injuries. President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore announced 2 days of national mourning over the atrocities. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks yet, but tit-for-tat reprisal killings between the Fulani and rival farming communities have surged over the past year across Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. Burkina Faso has been battling a militant insurgency since 2015. Now, 35 people, including women and children, have died after two buses collided on a busy road in Ghana's Bono East region. Officials say 6 people were injured in the accident and are in critical condition. Medics say the 27 victims were burnt beyond recognition. Police say a preliminary investigation shows the driver of a bus veered out of his lane before colliding head-on with a smaller vehicle. It said the impact of the collision sparked a fire that tore through the other vehicle. Boko Haram militants have killed 8 soldiers in an attack on an army post in Niger's southeastern region of Difa. The Defense Ministry says 3 others are missing after the attack. The ministry says the post was attacked by 20 heavily armed vehicles. It said the army destroyed the assailants after exchanging fire. The region, which borders Nigeria and Chad, has been repeatedly attacked by the Boko Haram since 2015. Located in the Lake Chad Basin, Difa is home to 120,000 refugees from Nigeria fleeing the group's violence. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A Dutch court has ruled that the trial of 4 suspects in the 2014 shooting down of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 can go ahead. None of the suspects, though, were present at the court, so will be tried in absentia. The Chief Judge, Hendrik Steinhuis, said the court understands the impact of the loss of so many lives in such an inconceivable manner. The trial will examine whether the men were responsible for destroying the airplane over war-torn eastern Ukraine nearly 6 years ago. Prosecutors say the suspects face preliminary charges of the murder of 298 people and causing the aircraft to crash, killing everyone on board. Previous attempts to set up a UN-backed tribunal failed because of Russian opposition. Well, Russia's parliament will vote today on President Vladimir Putin's controversial constitutional amendments. The Kremlin says Putin hopes the amendments will secure the country's political future for the coming decades. In January, Putin began a political storm by proposing changes to the constitution while removing loyal ally Dmitry Medvedev as prime minister. If passed by parliament, this will be the first major change to Russia's basic laws since 1993. Putin is due to step down after his 20-plus-year rule in 2024. The amendments will allow the Russian president to contest another term. The opposition, including prominent leader Alexei Navalny, have criticized the proposals, warning Putin wants to remain leader for life. On to news coming out of Mexico, where climate change and water scarcity are forcing farmers to abandon traditional staples like corn in favor of more viable options. Others, though, are giving up farming altogether, selling their fields and leaving their ancestral homelands. This report explains.
Corn has been a symbol of Mexican pride for centuries and formed the backbone of the civilization that gave rise to this country. But its future is now in doubt as climate change and endless droughts transform the Mexican landscape.
We didn't get the rain that was supposed to fall in June, July, August or September, and that's what we see now. The maize didn't grow because there was no water.
In Puebla State, which is known as the Mexican cradle of corn, cultivation has plummeted by 18%.
We have seen the flora and fauna has changed, and there are longer periods of drought and higher temperatures. During winter, the drops in temperature are harsher, and all that has consequences on the agricultural sector in the region.
Farmers are now turning to less water-intensive crops like pistachio or cactus. Others are selling their fields to real estate developers and looking for other ways to make a living. This phenomenon threatens the country's food supply and is likely to drive up prices of basic essentials.
Well, Hindus in Pakistan have celebrated the Holi festival. They danced and adorned each other's faces with colored powder. The festival is celebrated as thanksgiving for a good harvest and to mark the start of spring. This report has the details.
Explosions of pink and purple powder, rainbow dust tumbling through the air, faces, hair, hands and clothes rendered in a kaleidoscope of colors. Hindus in Pakistan took to the streets to celebrate Holi, one of the world's most photogenic religious festivals. On the eve of the festival, large pyres were lit to signify the burning of evil spirits.
We celebrate this festival of colors so that the lives of all of us are filled with happiness and joy, and life must go on. The concept of Holi is victory of good over evil and bringing joyfulness in human lives.
Hindus form the biggest minority community in Pakistan. According to official estimates, 7.5 million Hindus live in the country.
Being a Pakistani, I feel immensely happy that as a Hindu, I don't encounter any problems and that we have full rights here and we celebrate our each festival in a free and befitting manner.
Although the festival finds its origins in South Asia, it has now gained popularity across the world. This year in India, coronavirus fears dampened some Holi celebrations as the number of colour buyers has decreased by at least 50%. This is because some are concerned the colours used for Holi were being imported from China.
South Korea and Japan have begun a fresh round of trade talks despite an ongoing diplomatic quarrel. Seoul said the countries conducted a Director General level video conference after enacting border blockades because of the new coronavirus outbreak. South Korea's Director General for International Trade Policy, Lee Ho-hyun, attended the video conference while his counterpart, Yoichi Ida, represented Japan. The meeting is expected to run through today afternoon. In December, a meeting in Tokyo broke up without any progress. The trade dispute began in July last year after Japan restricted chip and display industries exports to Seoul. In response, Seoul removed Tokyo from its list of trusted partners and sought mediation from the World Trade Organization. European markets have edged higher, recovering yesterday's losses after stocks on Wall Street saw their worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. Investors are betting on coordinated stimulus measures by major central banks to shield the global economy from the effects of the coronavirus outbreak. London's FTSE 100 has risen over 2%, bouncing back from its worst session in over 10 years. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 2% higher, while Frankfurt's DAX has added 1.5%. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite led the gains, closing nearly 2% higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng picked up almost 1.5% as shares of the Chinese tech giant Tencent and Alibaba grew nearly 3% each. The Nikkei 225 and Seoul's Kospi also made attempts to gain ground.
I do think we're in fear. People are just indiscriminate selling. Thursday and Friday, you saw a long-only sell. A lot of the broker desks that I work with reported that. And so when you get to the point where the long-onlys are selling, that truly is risk-off. And that was before the lack of agreement and the OPEC trade negotiations fell apart. So you're going to see even more of that.
Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. there you have it. You're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here on Indus News. Of course, for the latest updates, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news.